Admiral Vextar stood on the bridge of his massive flagship, watching the stars bend and twist as his fleet dropped out of hyperspace. 512 warships materialized at the edge of the solar system like deadly metal predators emerging from the void. The sight never got old for him. Each ship in his armada was a monument to Draconian superiority, bristling with weapons that had turned entire planets to ash. His scaled fingers drummed against the command console as he studied the primitive system before them. One yellow star, a handful of rocky planets, and somewhere among them, the species that called itself human. The intelligence briefings had been almost insulting in their simplicity. These mammals had barely crawled out of their gravity well a few decades ago, while the Draconian Empire had been conquering star systems for over 3,000 years. "Sir, we're receiving automated broadcasts from the third planet," reported his communications officer, a young Draconian whose neck scales still showed the bright green of youth. "They appear to be entertainment transmissions and commercial data streams." Vextar's laugh was like grinding stone. "Still broadcasting their little shows while we arrive to end their civilization. How perfectly pathetic." He had seen this before on 17 different worlds. The pattern never changed. First came denial, then desperate attempts at negotiation, followed by hopeless military resistance, and finally, submission or extinction. The massive dreadnoughts moved through space with the confidence of apex predators. Each ship was 3 times larger than anything these humans had ever built, according to their spy networks. The Draconians had been watching human expansion for years, noting their clumsy first steps into interstellar space, their primitive fusion drives, their laughably weak energy shields. On the lead destroyer, Captain Ryu sat in his command chair, fingers moving across his control panel with practiced ease. The human defense station hung in space like a small metal flower, looking utterly insignificant compared to the approaching alien armada. But appearances could be deceiving. "Captain, the Draconian fleet is broadcasting on all frequencies," his communications officer reported. "They're demanding our immediate surrender and threatening total annihilation if we resist." Ryu nodded calmly. He had been expecting this moment for 5 years, ever since intelligence first confirmed the Draconian Empire's expansion toward human space. While other species had fallen to these reptilian conquerors, humanity had been preparing. Not with bigger ships or more powerful weapons, but with something far more dangerous: patience and cunning. "Forward their transmission to command," Ryu instructed. "And begin evacuation protocol 7. I want all non-essential personnel off this station within 30 minutes. Deep within the defense station, Commander Minho watched holographic displays showing the positions of every ship in both fleets. To the Draconians, it looked like humanity had maybe 24 vessels scattered throughout the system. Patrol boats, cargo haulers, a couple of outdated cruisers that looked like they belonged in a museum. What the aliens couldn't see were the other 300 human ships currently drifting through space like ghosts. Advanced metamaterial hulls bent light around them, making them invisible to conventional sensors. Quantum dampeners eliminated their heat signatures. Silent drive systems produced no detectable emissions. Each vessel was a masterpiece of stealth technology, developed in secret over the past decade. Minho's fingers danced across his controls, sending coded signals to ships that officially didn't exist. "All shadow units, maintain position. Do not engage until the trap is fully set." Admiral Vextar studied the tactical display showing human positions. "Pitiful," he muttered. 23 vessels against over 500. They must know this is hopeless. His tactical officer, a Skardam, veteran of the Andorian campaign, pointed to the display. "Sir, should we deploy in standard conquest formation? Surround their planet and demand surrender?" "No," Vextar decided. "Let's show them what real power looks like first. Order the fleet to advance in battle formation. I want every weapon charged and ready. When they see our full might bearing down on them, they'll beg for mercy like all the others." The Draconian armada began moving deeper into the solar system, their massive engines creating brilliant flares of light against the darkness. Each ship was a fortress of metal and energy, carrying enough firepower to crack a planet's crust. They had never encountered a species that could stand against them for more than a few hours. But as they advanced toward Earth, invisible watchers tracked their every movement. Human ships shadowed them from impossible distances, their crews, patient and silent as hunting wolves. The trap was being set with clockwork precision. The Draconians flew forward with absolute confidence, never suspecting that they were about to encounter humanity's greatest weapon, the element of surprise, wielded with cold, calculating fury. The transmission began exactly as planned. Ambassador Sujin sat in her pristine white office overlooking the blue curve of Earth, her hands folded neatly on the polished desk. Behind her, holographic displays showed peaceful images of human cities, children playing in parks, and families enjoying quiet moments together. Everything about the scene was designed to project calm, reasonable civilization. "Greetings, travelers from distant stars," she began, her voice carrying the practiced warmth of a seasoned diplomat. "I am Ambassador Sujin of the United Earth Council. We welcome you to our solar system and hope your journey has been pleasant." On Admiral Vexistar's flagship, the bridge crew watched this transmission with barely concealed amusement. The human female looked so small, so fragile, speaking as if she were greeting invited guests rather than facing the most powerful military force in the galaxy. Her dark hair was pulled back in a simple style, and she wore a modest blue uniform, with no visible weapons or armor. "We understand you represent a great civilization," Sujin continued, maintaining her serene expression. "The United Earth Council believes that all intelligent species can find common ground through dialogue and mutual respect. We would be honored to host a delegation from your fleet aboard our diplomatic station near Luna. Perhaps over a shared meal, we can discuss how our peoples might coexist peacefully in this vast universe." Admiral Vextar's laughter started as a low rumble in his throat and built to a roar that echoed through his command chamber. His officers joined in, their reptilian voices creating a chorus of mockery that filled the bridge. "Did you hear that?" he gasped between laughs. "They want to invite us for dinner, like we're visiting neighbors instead of their conquerors." His tactical officer wiped tears from his scaled cheeks. "Sir, they're either incredibly brave or incredibly stupid." "Stupid," Vextar decided immediately. "Always stupid. In 3,000 years of conquest, I've learned that prey species always try the same pathetic tactics. First diplomacy, then bribes, then desperate military resistance, and finally surrender. These mammals are just following the script." The transmission continued, with Sujin explaining human culture, their values of peace and cooperation, their desire to learn from other civilizations. She spoke about Earth's diverse ecosystems, their art and music, their scientific achievements. To the Draconians, it sounded like a prey animal trying to convince predators that it was too valuable to eat. "Send a response," Vextar ordered. "Tell them we'll consider their invitation after they witness our power. All ships maintain advanced formation. I want them to see every weapon, every shield, every bit of our overwhelming superiority." Far below on Luna Base, General Taehyun stood in the command center carved deep beneath the moon's surface. Banks of monitors showed the Draconian fleet's positions, their movement patterns, their energy signatures. He had been studying alien military tactics for 15 years, ever since humanity first detected signs of aggressive expansion in nearby sectors. "They're moving exactly as predicted," he observed to his staff. "Standard intimidation approach, full formation integrity, weapons charged but not targeted. They want us to see their strength and despair." His aide, a young officer with tired eyes, pulled up comparative fleet analyses. "Sir, by conventional measures, they outgun us 40-1. Their individual ships carry more firepower than our entire visible fleet." Taehyun smiled grimly. "Good thing we're not fighting conventionally." 300 kilometers away, Lieutenant Jiwon floated in the command pod of the stealth ship Whisper. At 25, she was one of the youngest ship commanders in human history, but her record in the shadow wars against pirates and smugglers had earned her this critical position. Her vessel was a masterpiece of advanced engineering, its hull composed of metamaterials that could bend electromagnetic radiation around them like water flowing around a stone. "All stealth units, this is Shadow Command," She broadcast on encrypted channels that the Draconians couldn't detect. Initiate final phase preparation. Power down all non-essential systems and activate full-spectrum camouflage. Across the solar system, invisible ships began their deadly dance. Some drifted near asteroid fields, indistinguishable from floating rocks. Others hung in the shadow of gas giant moons, their cold hulls matching the temperature of empty space. The most daring positioned themselves directly in the path of the advancing Draconian fleet, trusting their stealth technology to keep them hidden. Each human vessel was equipped with weapons the aliens had never encountered. Phase cannons that could bypass shields by existing in a slightly different dimension until the moment of impact. Quantum torpedoes that materialized inside enemy hulls. Virus programs designed to infiltrate and corrupt alien computer systems within seconds. But the most dangerous weapon was patience itself. While the Draconians advanced with the confidence of apex predators, humanity waited with the stillness of persistence hunters. They had learned from studying every species the reptilians had conquered, analyzing their tactics, identifying their weaknesses, and preparing countermeasures. On her flagship, Admiral Vextar watched Ambassador Sujin's transmission end with another polite bow and an invitation to share the gift of peace between our peoples. He shook his massive head in disgust. Weak creatures always cling to hope until the very end. Signal the fleet, advance to Earth orbit. Let's show these mammals what happens to species that waste our time with diplomatic nonsense. The trap was now fully set. 500 Draconian ships moved toward what they believed was an easy conquest, while 300 invisible human vessels closed in around them like a tightening noose. The hunters had become the hunted, but they didn't know it yet. The first sign of trouble was so small that Admiral Vextar almost missed it entirely. Scout ship Talon 7 was transmitting routine patrol data when the communication simply stopped. Not with the burst of static that usually accompanied battle damage. Not with the telltale energy spike of an explosion. Just silence. One moment, the pilot was reporting clear space ahead. The next moment there was nothing but empty frequency. Probably a communication malfunction, Vextar muttered, waving a scaled hand dismissively. Scout ships were the cheapest vessels in his fleet, built quickly and crewed by expendable personnel. If one broke down, they had dozens more. Send Talon 9 to investigate and continue the advance. His fleet moved deeper into the solar system like a river of metal and fire. The massive warships maintained perfect formation, their shields shimmering. With contained energy, their weapon arrays charged and ready. Each vessel was a fortress capable of reducing a city to ash in minutes. Together, they represented the accumulated military might of an empire that had never known defeat. But something was wrong in the darkness between stars. Talon 9 approached. The coordinates where Talon 7 should have been and found absolutely nothing. No debris field, no energy residue, no trace that a ship had ever existed in that location. The pilot's confused report crackled over the fleet's communication channels. Admiral, there's nothing here, no wreckage, no distress beacon, nothing at all. Before Vextar could respond, Squadron 12 disappeared. 15 ships vanishing in the span of 30 seconds should have been impossible. These weren't tiny scouts, but full-sized destroyers with crews of over 200 each. They had been flying in tight formation, their captains chattering casually about the easy conquest ahead, when suddenly their signals went dark. Not one by one, but all at once, as if some invisible hand had simply erased them from existence. What in the void is happening? Vextar roared, his massive fists slamming down on his command console. The tactical display showed 15 empty positions where his ships should have been, gaps in his formation like missing teeth in a predator's jaw. His communications officer frantically tried to raise the missing vessels, while sensor technicians ran full-spectrum scans. Sir, I'm detecting no weapons fire, no energy signatures, no indication of any hostile activity. They're just gone. Captain Hyan drifted through space like a ghost, his stealth destroyer silence invisible to every sensor the Draconians possessed. His ship was a marvel of human engineering, its metamaterial hull bending light and radiation around it so completely that it might as well have existed in another dimension. Only the most advanced quantum sensors could detect its presence, and, Those were secrets humanity had never shared. Through his viewing port, he watched a Draconian heavy cruiser glide past, its crew completely unaware that death floated just kilometers away. The alien vessel was massive, bristling with weapons and armor that could withstand anything in their conventional arsenal. But conventional weapons weren't what they faced today. "Target the cruiser's main reactor," Hyun whispered to his weapons. "Officer. Phase cannon, minimal energy signature, make it clean." The weapon fired without sound, without light, without any indication that anything had happened at all. The phase cannon's energy beam existed in a slightly different dimensional space until the moment of impact, passing through the cruiser's shield as if they were made of air. The beam materialized inside the ship's reactor core and converted the entire power plant into pure energy. The cruiser didn't explode in the traditional sense. Instead, it seemed to fold in on itself, its matter converting to energy that dissipated, harmlessly into space. One moment it was there, a massive presence on every sensor screen. The next moment there was only empty vacuum where 3,000 Draconian warriors had been living and breathing. No debris. No distress signal. No evidence that the ship had ever existed. Across the battlefield, other human vessels were conducting their own silent hunts. The stealth frigate Ghost slipped between two Draconian destroyers and fired quantum torpedoes that materialized inside their hulls before detonating. The cloaked corvette Phantom positioned itself above a squadron of fighters and released a cloud of microscopic hunter-killer drones that infiltrated the alien ship's life support systems. Each attack was perfectly coordinated, timed to create maximum confusion and terror. Ships vanished from the edges of the formation first, then from the middle, then seemingly at random. The Draconian fleet began to tighten their formation, overlapping shields and increasing sensor sweeps, but it made no difference. They were fighting an enemy they couldn't see, couldn't track, and couldn't understand. Admiral Vexitar watched his tactical display with growing horror as red markers indicating destroyed vessels multiplied across the screen. In 6 hours, he had lost over half his fleet to an enemy that apparently didn't exist. His remaining ships huddled together like frightened animals, their crews jumping at shadows and firing at empty space. "Sir," his tactical officer reported, with a trembling voice, "we've lost 312 vessels. No confirmed enemy contacts, no successful counterattacks, no intelligence on their capabilities or positions." The proud admiral who had conquered 17 civilizations found himself facing something he had never encountered in 3 decades of warfare. An enemy that hunted with perfect stealth and absolute precision. His mighty fleet was being dismantled, piece by ghosts that struck without warning and vanished without trace. In the cold darkness of space, humanity's invisible wolves circled their prey with patient hunger, preparing for the final phase of their carefully orchestrated hunt. The remaining Draconian ships clustered together like wounded animals seeking shelter from an invisible storm. What had once been a proud formation of conquering warships now resembled a desperate huddle of survivors, their overlapping energy shields creating a brilliant dome of protective light against the star-filled darkness. But the light offered no real protection against enemies they couldn't see or understand. Admiral Vexitar stood on his bridge, watching his tactical officers fire weapons at empty coordinates. Massive plasma cannons discharged their deadly cargo into vacant space, hoping to hit something, anything that might explain the systematic destruction of his fleet. The random firing lit up the void with brilliant flashes of energy, but each blast found only emptiness. "Sector 7 clear, no targets," reported one gunner, his voice tight with barely controlled panic. "Sector 12 clear," called another, sweat beading on his scaled forehead, despite the ship's climate control. The fear was spreading through the fleet like a plague. Crews that had once boasted about their conquests now whispered prayers to forgotten gods, while officers who had commanded with iron discipline found their voices shaking as they gave orders to subordinates who might not survive the next few minutes. Commander Seoyeon moved through this chaos like a predator born to hunt in darkness. Her stealth fighter was barely 30 meters long, a sleek needle of advanced technology that slipped between the massive alien warships with effortless grace. Her quantum drive produced no visible exhaust, no heat signature, no electromagnetic emissions that conventional sensors could detect. She was a ghost with weapons, death-given form and purpose. Through her cockpit display, she watched the Draconian fleet's panicked movements. Their formation was tight but clumsy, ships bumping shields in their desperation to stay close together. Fear made them predictable, and predictable enemies were dead enemies. She selected a destroyer on the formation's outer edge, a vessel 3 times larger than her fighter but flying with the erratic movements of a crew on the edge of breakdown. Her targeting computer locked onto the ship's main reactor, calculating the precise angle needed for a clean kill. Phase torpedo armed, she whispered to her weapon system. Target the reactor core. Make it quiet. The torpedo launched without sound or light existing in a dimensional space slightly removed from normal reality. It passed through the destroyer's shields like they were made of air, phased through layers of armor and bulkheads, and materialized inside the ship's power plant. The explosion was contained, controlled, converting the entire vessel into energy that dissipated harmlessly into space. One moment the destroyer was there, its crew of 800 reptilian warriors going about their duties. The next moment, there was only empty space where the ship had been. No debris, no explosion visible to outside observers, just another gap in the Draconian formation. Admiral Vextar watched this latest disappearance with eyes that had seen too much horror in too short a time. His hands, once steady enough to sign death warrants for entire civilizations, now trembled as they gripped his command console. "They don't fight like any warriors I've ever faced," he whispered, his voice barely audible above the bridge's emergency systems. "They hunt like demons from the void itself." His tactical officer, a veteran of dozens of campaigns, nodded with the haunted expression of someone whose worldview had been shattered. "Sir, they're not engaging in battle. They're picking us off. One by one, like predators culling a herd. This wasn't war as the Draconians understood it. War was fleets meeting in open space, exchanging devastating volleys of energy weapons while fighters swarmed between capital ships. War was about superior firepower, better armor, faster engines. This was something else entirely. This was extermination, conducted with surgical precision by enemies who struck from shadows and vanished before retaliation was possible. Captain Wu Jin commanded a pack of 6 stealth corvettes that moved through the battle space with the coordination of wolves hunting, in formation. Each ship was invisible to Draconian sensors, their crews communicating through quantum-encrypted channels that couldn't be intercepted or jammed. They had trained for this moment for years, practicing maneuvers that seemed impossible until you watched them executed with deadly precision. "Phoenix Wing, position Alpha," he transmitted to his squadron. "Prepare for coordinated strike. Target the command cluster. Simultaneous engagement from 6 vectors." His ships positioned themselves around a group of Draconian heavy cruisers, approaching from above, below, and from 4 different angles within the formation itself. To outside observers, it would appear that the alien ship simply exploded without cause. But the reality was far more terrifying. 6 invisible predators were moving into position for a synchronized kill. "All units, fire on my mark," Wu Jin commanded, his voice calm despite the magnitude of destruction he was about to unleash. 3, 2, 1 mark. Phase cannons fired simultaneously from 6 different positions, their beams materializing inside the target ship's critical systems. Reactors overloaded, command centers vaporized, life support systems failed catastrophically. In the span of 3 seconds, 12 Draconian vessels simply ceased to exist, their combined crews of over 9,000 warriors eliminated without a chance to fight back. The psychological impact was devastating. The surviving Draconians realized they weren't just losing a battle, they were being systematically exterminated by an enemy that showed no mercy and offered no chance for honorable combat. These humans didn't announce their attacks, didn't demand surrender, didn't even seem interested in conquest. They simply killed with the cold efficiency of natural predators removing a threat. Officers who had once bragged about crushing entire species now huddled in their command centers, jumping at every shadow on their sensor screens. Crews that had marched confidently into 17 previous conquests now prayed desperately for survival against an enemy that seemed to materialize from empty space itself. The mighty Draconian war fleet, pride of an empire that had never known defeat. was learning what it meant to be prey in a universe where humanity had become the ultimate apex predator. The silence stretched across space like a funeral shroud, where once over 500 mighty warships had blazed through the void with the confidence of apex predators. Now only 37 vessels remained, huddled together in a desperate cluster near Jupiter's orbit. The survivors' shields flickered, weakly, their crews too terrified to maintain proper formation, too broken to do anything but wait for the next wave of invisible death. Admiral Vexitar sat slumped in his command chair, staring at displays that showed empty coordinates where his fleet should have been. His reptilian features, once proud and commanding, now bore the hollow expression of someone who had witnessed the impossible. In 12 hours, he had lost over 90% of his forces to an enemy he had never seen, never detected, never even suspected existed until it was far too late. The communication screen flickered to life and Ambassador Sujin's face appeared once again. But the gentle diplomat who had welcomed them to the solar system was gone. In her place sat a woman whose dark eyes held the cold calculation of a natural-born killer. Her diplomatic smile had vanished, replaced by an expression that made Vextar's blood run cold in his veins. "Admiral," she said, her voice carrying none of its earlier warmth. "I trust you've had time to consider our earlier invitation for peaceful negotiations." Vextar's claws scraped against his armrest as he leaned forward. "What are you?" he whispered, his voice barely audible above the bridge's emergency systems. "What kind of species are you?" Sujin tilted her head slightly, studying him like a scientist examining an interesting specimen. "We're exactly what we've always been, Admiral. The difference is that you never bothered to look closely enough to understand what that meant." She gestured to something off-screen, and the display split to show tactical readouts of the battle. Vextar watched in growing horror as the data revealed the true scope of humanity's preparation. Every Draconian ship movement had been tracked, every weakness catalogued, every tactical decision anticipated and countered before it was even made. "Your species has dominated this region of space for 3,000 years, Sujin continued, her tone conversational despite the devastation surrounding them. "You built your empire on the belief that strength comes from size, from numbers, from the ability to project overwhelming force. It's a philosophy that served you well against species that thought the same way." The tactical display showed human stealth ships repositioning around the surviving Draconian vessels. Invisible predators, moving with the patience of experienced hunters, ready to strike if needed but content to watch and wait for now. Vextar realized that his remaining ships were completely surrounded, had been surrounded for hours by enemies he couldn't detect. "But humans learned a different lesson," Sujin said, her voice carrying the weight of species memory. "We spent millennia as prey animals on our homeworld, hunted by creatures larger and stronger than ourselves. We survived by becoming smarter, more adaptable, more cunning than anything that wanted to eat us. When we finally reached the stars, we didn't abandon those lessons. We perfected them." Admiral Vextar's hands shook as he processed the implications. "You've been watching us, studying us." "For 37 years, Sujin confirmed without emotion, "ever since our deep space sensors first detected your expansion pattern. We analyzed every conquest, every battle, every tactical doctrine your species employed. We studied the wreckage of civilizations you destroyed, interviewed survivors from worlds you conquered, built detailed profiles of your capabilities and limitations." The communication screen shifted to show archived footage of previous Draconian conquests. Vexitar recognized some of the battles, remembered the easy victories against species that had tried to match Draconian firepower with conventional weapons. All of them had failed because they had played by the same rules, fought the same kind of war. "While you grew fat and overconfident, conquering species that couldn't effectively fight back, we prepared for the day you would come for us," Sujin continued. "We developed new technologies, new tactics, new ways of thinking about warfare itself. We became the predator that hunts other predators." Deep beneath Earth's surface, Commander Sung Soo monitored the conversation from humanity's primary war room. Banks of screens showed the positions of every human vessel in the solar system, including the invisible fleet that surrounded the surviving Draconians like a noose. His finger hovered over controls that could eliminate the remaining alien ships in seconds. "Ambassador," he said quietly. His voice transmitted through encrypted channels. "The stealth fleet is in position. We can end this cleanly. No survivors, no witnesses, no information returning to their empire." Sujin considered this for a moment, her expression thoughtful. The logical part of her mind recognized the tactical advantage of total elimination. Dead enemies told no tales, shared no intelligence, couldn't warn their homeworlds about humanity's capabilities. It would be the safe choice, the smart choice. But she shook her head slowly. "No, Commander. They need to carry a message." She turned her attention back to Admiral Vextar, whose reptilian features had gone pale with the realization of how completely he had been outmaneuvered. "Admiral, you have exactly 1 hour to gather your surviving ships and leave human space. You will return to your empire and deliver a message to your leaders." Vextar's voice cracked as he spoke. "What message?" Sujin's smile was colder than the vacuum between stars. "Tell them that Earth is not to be disturbed. Tell them that humanity watches from the darkness between stars, and our patience has limits. Tell them that if they come for us again, there will be no survivors to carry word back home." The communication screen went dark, leaving Admiral Vextar alone with the devastating knowledge of his defeat. Around him, his remaining crews scrambled to prepare for immediate departure, their movements frantic with terror and desperation. As the 37 surviving ships limped away from the solar system, they carried with them a new understanding of humanity's place in the cosmic order. The small, seemingly primitive species from the third planet had taught the galaxy's greatest predators a lesson that would echo through space for generations to come. In the vast darkness between stars, sometimes the most dangerous hunter is the one you never see coming. The silence that followed their departure was not empty. It was full of watching eyes, invisible guardians, and the patient fury of a species that had learned to perfect the art of the hunt.